The United States and the European Union have arrived at a trade agreement after months of tense negotiations. But now that the deal is done, critics are saying that Europe caved to President Trump and is getting the short end of the stick. To understand why, we turn to Deutsche Welle correspondent Emily Leshner in Berlin. Emily, why are critics saying that this is a bad deal for the European Union?
Well, the first and main reason is that 15% baseline tariff that will apply to around 70% of EU goods coming into the U.S. At the very start of these tariff negotiations, Europe was hoping and expecting that it would be able to secure a tariff rate that was in the single digits and really maintain what it had before the second Trump term, tariffs that were around 2.5% to 4%, depending on the product. And then it seemed at some point that Europe and the European Commission lost sight of this goal. President Trump threatened at one point 50% tariffs, and then Europe hoped maybe it could walk away with at least a 10% tax if it didn't seem like staying in the single digits was possible. Then Trump threatens 30% if a deal wasn't made by August 1st, and that's when Europe decides that 15% is probably the best that they can get. So in the eyes of many experts, academics, and even EU heads of state, Europe did cave. The position is that the EU Commission is that 15% is better than the 30 that was looming on the horizon. But others see 15 is not much better than the 2.5% to 4% tariff rate that Europe had in the past. So that is one major reason, is the agreed tariff rate. The other is that Europe also promised the U.S. that it would purchase $750 billion of fossil fuel energy over the next 3 years. That amounts to $250 billion per year or so, which is way more than Europe is even currently importing from the U.S. It's a fraction of it. Last year, Europe spent around $70 billion importing U.S. crude, LNG, and coal combined. So again, it's a fraction of what they're promising every year. And then on top of that, finally, EU policy is investment is shifting towards renewables. So this is just not the direction that Europe wants to go in. And Europe also promised $600 billion worth of investments in the U.S. And this comes at a time when the European economy is struggling, and a lot of leaders think that kind of investment could be better spent at home. So a couple of different reasons that people are not very happy in Europe with the trade deal as it stands.
Why would the European Union promise something that it's unlikely to be able to deliver?
Well, some analysts have criticized EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen for promising investments and energy purchases when they say the power to do so doesn't even sit with the Commission, let alone just the sheer amount of the investment and the purchases that were promised, which now amounts to over €1 trillion. So why would the EU agree to do this? It's also possible that von der Leyen understands that ultimately this is a hard thing to enforce. And that in the past, the U.S. Has let other countries off the hook for not meeting purchasing commitments that were agreed upon during a trade deal. And one really good example of this is what happened a few years ago with the U.S. trade war with China. China agreed to buy an additional $200 billion in U.S. exports when they came to a deal. They had a 2-year deadline to do so. And when time ran out, China had only paid around 58% of what it had promised. And there was no penalty. So some are saying that von der Leyen's deal was short-sighted, and then others say that she's playing the long game, that she's placating the Trump administration now with the expectation that things most likely will change in the future. They've changed a lot up until this point. And I mean, even as we speak, there are some whisperings that this deal could even end up falling through because both sides are discovering that they're interpreting certain things in the deal differently from one another. So things are clearly in a constant state of flux. And that could be one reason why the EU felt fine promising some things that it probably couldn't deliver.
Is there anything in the deal that benefits the European Union?
That's a good question. I mean, some products won't get hit with any tariffs. There's certain chemicals and aircraft parts, as well as some agricultural products. So it's good news for the aeronautical industry and for food producers right now. The EU is also trying to lock in 0% tariffs for a few other products like wine and spirits. And some analysts are saying that the end to all the uncertainty is good for markets. That's one benefit to the deal. and it's also good for investors' confidence. We did see the markets gain a bit after the initial announcement, but again, that could change very quickly, as we've seen. And one industry or sector that might have gotten a better deal with this is the European car industry, because now tariffs on cars have gone down from the 27.5% rate to the baseline at 15. So that is one small upside for the European car industry out of this.
All right. Now with that, it's a wrap, but do stay tuned for more.